here showing, and you can see I can't help myself. I had to say bedrock there. But it's obviously highly erodible. Do you remember how long that thing ran? It was only 6 inches deep, for heaven's sakes. You know, it could have been 10 feet or 20 feet deep. It was highly erosive. It was shocking how erosive it was. And I say again, it's okay that we didn't know that, I suppose, although it does seem strange to me that someone would own a dam for half of a century and never, ever, ever fill it the whole way up and let the emergency spillway run one time just to know what was going to happen. But okay, you know, all right, okay, you didn't. So now you learn this. Well, what a heck of a time to learn it. But it seems so obvious. And I don't want to beat people up by looking at something after it's occurred. That's unfair. But now we know. Now we know. Back in 2005, when the Friends of the River said, you must armor this emergency spillway because we're concerned about debris being flushed down this beautiful river. We're concerned about the ecological ramifications of this. We're concerned about the fisheries. Those were all very valid, weren't they? And all of those assertions, which were ignored by FERC, which, by the way, I have great respect for, generally, but they've been proved to be valid. All those things occurred. And the cost of having armored that spillway is absolutely insignificant to the costs already expended in this ridiculous evolution of plugging holes after the fact that we're now forced into playing because of the evolution of changes that have taken place on this dam. Spending $100 million a month. It's almost beyond comprehension. Another picture of the OG Weir. And in this, I'm saying, how do we fix that? And you can see the kind of light patch down across the front there. At the front toe of that weir, what someone will have to figure out here eventually, before this is all over, is that we will need to drill this, and we'll need to inject probably a urethane-based grout down to depth where there actually is high recovery bedrock. And this will have to be sealed because all the armoring in the world downstream, which is what's proposed under the new proposal, will do nothing if we allow water to move under the structure. So this grouting program will necessarily have to take place eventually. Here's a picture kind of showing it, and thank God I have Lisa to put these things together because I'd have no idea how to make these silly little pictures she makes. But you can see on the right there is the OG Weir or something like it, and there's the grouting program you see in the yellow coming down there. And the left, of course, shows the water up and the water flowing under the structure, which is what we worry about here and what I believe is probably taking place. The next failure that is of great concern and which is one of the evolutions of failure mode is that this principal spillway continues to erode back. We talked about cavitation briefly, and I apologize, I kind of lost my way on that. Cavitation is this really high velocity water where actually bubbles of vacuum form because the water separates from the structure. And then you have a hydrated concrete which actually boils out into that void. There's also a shock moment created by this, but cavitation did not play a part in the failure of the plate slabs of the sluiceway, of the principal spillway, because the velocities are not even close to being great enough. What occurred that caused that failure, which unfortunately I predicted correctly would occur, was the complete hydration of the soils under pressure outside of the structure of the sluiceway itself, including charging the drains, where if you look back for many years, when they actuated the spillway, water shot out of the drains under pressure well into the sluiceway. The drains are to vent phreatic water that's migrating down the slope and toward the spillway, to vent those out to the atmosphere within the sluiceway so that you don't have a pool of water under that. You don't ever want wholly hydrated soils beneath a structure like that. That's all they're for. They might drip a bit. Some of them might be completely dry. Never should you ever see water shooting out of them. They aren't meant to be charged. They aren't meant to be under pressure like that. When I saw them under pressure like that, I said, aha, we have a port that is communicating with these drains and actually shooting out through the drains. That's a plate slab that's about to fail. And then indeed, it did. When you have this situation, you have a positive high pressure beneath the slab. The slab has been, the soils have been eroded from beneath it. This is pretty typical, and I've seen this hundreds of times, drilling holes and putting cameras through plate slabs of sluiceways and dams. So you'll have a void, often a very big void, some of them big enough for guys to crawl through, beneath this plate slab. And then you have this high velocity water on the top of it. Now, water moving very quickly across the plate slab, and then water beneath it under the same head pressure as the pool at that particular elevation, less skin friction. So a lot of pressure. So beneath it you have a significant pressure, and on top of it you have a pile of water moving very rapidly. And if you remember back to high school, Brunelli's principle, water or a fluid moving at a high speed produces a negative effect, a lessening of pressures. So you end up with a high pressure beneath, a low pressure on top. Generally, that won't fail a plate slab because generally they're massive chunks of concrete. But what happens then is that you get some imperfection in flow, and this induces a vibration which self-amplifies. And it is this undulation of the slab that can get horribly violent at the end that eventually will displace these slabs. And they go downstream like dominoes. It's shocking when one goes, concrete that just seems so solid in the face of the power of water, just blown downstream. As you guys know better probably than anyone in the United States. I mean, you've sat here with the front seat to the power of water. It is magnificent in every way. And here's a very a nice little picture of a dam with water porting beneath it. This is my concern. This communicative water, which is beneath these plate slabs, most probably some of that is coming from the pool. So most probably it's moving through the rock beneath this thing and manifesting out beneath the plate slabs. I haven't done an investigation of this, so I don't know exactly what's happening, but just judging from many, many dams that I've looked at, doing inspections on hundreds of dams, I think there's probably a good chance that that's what's happening there. The problem with that, of course, is that eventually water erodes soils, eventually water erodes rock, and the eventuality of that could be a compromise of the gate structure itself, which is the worst possible evolution of the failure mode of the principal spillway. We talked about liquefaction. Here is an instance of liquefaction on a small embankment, just to give you an idea of kind of what it looks like when it takes place. So you had an embankment there, completely saturated. I don't know which one this is. There was one that was induced by a guy running heavy machinery across the dam, and a whole section of dam sloughed off into a water supply reservoir. Any certainly seismic activity can create liquefaction. Also, it can be induced by people doing things on the dam. And that brings us to a recent article that I read where the escarpment near the principal spillway, where they have these huge walls of rock and soil, they're concerned about, validly concerned about getting down into these holes and doing the work that they need to place, hopefully, Portland-based grouts to bring these things back up to an appropriate level to start their construction. And there's discussion, I don't know if it's started yet, of using explosives to, great, okay. So when you discharge an explosive, and I've had my license for explosives up until 9/11 when it became so cumbersome that I let it go, it transmits through a structure like this a wave, a shock wave, if you will. And that's what they're monitoring now. They're monitoring those, and they will, because that's a requirement of blasting these days in soils, so that they know what caused it. But being that you're on a dam with a known situation where you know you have a hydrated section of slope, you know it exists, you know it has existed, to induce shock waves through such a structure, it seems counterproductive to me, to put it in the nicest terms. It seems poorly considered. I can tell you that on a drained reservoir, I asked to do that very thing, and I was told in no uncertain terms, and Lisa may remember who we were working for, whether it was the Bureau of Rec or, I was told that I had to split all of that with a hydraulic splitter on a big machine. So I had to drill a hole, put a splitter in, and split the rock off, because they didn't want those kind of shock waves through the dam. That seems imprudent to me. Even though I recognize that we're in a great hurry now, but that seems an imprudent activity to me to take place on a dam that is as severely crippled as this. This is a picture of the hydrated area of the downstream